Meeting of the Salem City Council for a work session today. And if you could give us a roll call.
Councillor Kaiser?
Present.
Councillor Anderson?
Likewise.
Councillor Nakey?
Here.
Councillor McCoy?
Here.
Councillor Ossett?
Osik will be here in just a minute.
Okay. And there he is.
There he is.
Councillor Cook?
Ditto.
Councillor Lewis?
Here.
And Mayor Bennett.
Here. All righty. Shall we start with a Pledge of Allegiance?
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'm going to alert you I'm reordering the agenda. We'll do our information report first, and then we'll have public comment. Okay. No objections. All righty. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. For you this evening, we do have responses to the questions that were asked last week and questions that were asked since last week's council meeting. Staff is also here, both at the table as well as in the audience, to answer questions that you might have. We're here tonight to help your discussion and considerations regarding the police facility, seismic, civic center, and library. I believe being at this point tonight is an accomplishment, being down to 4 options. While I realize there might be other options that are discussed tonight, having 4 for you this evening is, I think, an accomplishment. City Attorney Atchison is prepared to walk through the resolutions if that's helpful to council. Staff continues to recommend the $69.1 million police facility bond measure. The chief and I understand the need to consider other options, and if council chooses the $64 million, 115,000 square foot facility, please be assured that the facility will serve the needs of the department and the city for decades. Dropping below that amount of square footage, the 115,000 square feet, we believe is too limiting to the department's future growth. The sooner the police department outgrows the building, the sooner the needs of the department will be back before council and competing with other city infrastructure and building needs. I have been asked recently why were these options presented and not others. I want to emphasize that the police facility planning process has been an iterative, decade-long process. With the defeat of the $82 million proposal in November, staff reviewed ways of reducing the square footage and the size, and that was guided by several parameters. One was maintaining the professional standards that were important to the Blue Ribbon Task Force, standards that we believe are critical to a well-designed and suitable facility. It was certainly also driven by the need to come in at under $82 million and for an option to include the ability to include seismic work on city facilities if feasible and under $82 million. We understand and are prepared to help council this evening with some questions that have come up regarding the professional standards. Depending upon the standard, there may be pros and cons to a change, and we're prepared this evening to discuss those with council. I want to emphasize that our consultants and staff have not arbitrarily reduced those standards. We have not arbitrarily made reductions to meet a predetermined cost. Preparing public facilities for natural disasters requires difficult choices involving response capability with limited public funds. Prioritization is required. Council and the public have chosen to seismically upgrade the fire stations. A critical element of the police facility planning discussions so far have been the seismic standards for a new building. Council has begun discussing other city facilities. Those discussions need to continue, and a specific plan with prioritization of needs has to be developed. If council chooses to proceed for a May bond measure, Please be assured that regardless of the option chosen, the city will emphasize project management, cost control, and financial stewardship. The goal for the project is a functional facility that will meet the police department's and the city's needs for decades. So thank you, and we look forward to assisting council with this very important decision.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead with public comment, and then you all can ask questions of staff after that, if that's okay. All right. Jeffrey James. Again, introduce yourself, your ward. You have 3 minutes. When the light turns red, just stop talking. We're going to move through a large group here tonight.
To figure out this computer. Let's see. Next story button. No.
Oh, next one.
Next one. Right there?
No, next,
Elected?
I think that.
Okay.
One more is.
That one? No.
No.
I need the expert. I'm due. This is,
Are you ready, Jeff? Are you ready to
I'm
go?
sorry, Jeff James.
Okay.
Ward 3. 4.
Pick one.
This is where we've been the last 6 years, and starting with the proposal for back here to drain the pond and to build a 75,000 square foot building, $70 million including seismic. And then that went down, public opinion was against that. So then staff did a pretty neat scheme for the O'Brien site in 2013 for 55.8, which I thought was good, and $15 million of seismic. Then we had the task force that some of us served on, and then we recommended the consultant to promptly double the size to 148,000, $82 million. So I wrote on that failed because we weren't successful. The next 3 bars are the options that are before you, or 3 of them. One is $62 million. See the blue is the police and the red is seismic. And I believe one of your options is to add 15 million of seismic to the of the library. Then you have a larger police option, $69 million. The one after that, I noticed in the staff report you have a wish list of something like $44 million of seismic and other remodels. So I put that on top of the larger police facility, and you see it goes off the chart, 113 million. So we don't need to consider that. The one we're recommending is the one on the right, which is based on Beaverton, and Beaverton looks like this. It was 90,000 for 32 million, or 389. So I won't bore you with that, but we've had meetings with the staff to analyze this, and our recommendation is this $66.3 million police seismic. And if you do the net seismic, it pays for both buildings. And we had a meeting specifically on seismic with Public Works this afternoon, and it looks like that can be done. What it doesn't cover is the architectural aesthetics of hiding the seismic after you've, reinforced the building. So it needs to be boosted a little bit. But that does both the police and seismic based on the Beaverton specs. Can I time up? Oh, no. If there are any questions, you can do it now or come back later.
Great, thank you. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. James, I know last time you presented something, and I've asked for a staff response to what you presented, and we've got some of that stuff, but I understand you also met with Mr. Brandow, and I think
Yes. Well,
part of that was to discuss the difference. He came up with 12.5 or $13.1 million of difference that explained the difference between the Beaverton site and the Salem site. I'm just wondering if you can comment on your meeting and on the differences as explained by Mr. Brando at the last meeting.
Attending were Mr. Damon, the assistant city engineer, Mr. Brando's partner, Kirk, out here, and also the assistant police chief. So we had a good discussion. There are three categories that make Salem Police Facility different from Beaverton, so you can't just apply the numbers directly. First one is Salem intends to have a crime lab to maybe back up, I don't know, state police, and we described it. We're the capital city, so we're a little different from Beaverton, and that's a policy decision for you, city fathers and councillors, to decide how we in that business. We also have a bomb squad. The bomb squad's important to our state, but whether Salem should head that up is a policy decision for you. I don't think it has a big cost impact on the building because to me a bomb squad can be in more industrial, less finished space, and it doesn't need to boost the cost of the $500 square foot building. The third category was we have a SWAT vehicle fleet, and currently housed in a couple of locations across from the library and out maybe the city shops and whatever. We're getting another vehicle. So that has to be dealt with. We also talked about compensating measures where Beaverton only uses a 5% contingency figure, and we've got to double that, 9% or something in these cost estimates. So that makes part of the difference. Another difference is what I suggested was we're dealing with a site that is a big parking lot. If we were to accept that parking lot as such and put our new building on the south end, and accept that parking lot with a parking deck that is half the size, 50 police cars instead of 100, there's about $2 to $4 million of saving. So all these types of things contribute to eating away that $12 million. So it makes us closer to Beaverton in cost if we weren't to build a big retaining wall along the creek and fill the site so it's like a Walmart parking lot that's dead level for shopping carts. If we can accept the slope, we save millions. Those types of things are examples of what we discussed.
Thank you. Okay, I want to take a moment to introduce our scouts that are here this evening. We've been joined by them. This is a combination of two troops, 17 and 37. They're 6th and 7th graders, all from Southeast Salem. Troop leaders are Daniel Stevenson and Richie Trussell. Great. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. We're talking about a new police station and a potential bond measure going out. So if you want to join up, just sign up and you can come on up and comment on it too, huh? Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor.
Brian Hines.
Yep. Brian Hines, 10371 Lake Drive. So I wanted to address the question that I've heard a lot of talk about how important is seismic retrofitting and making these buildings earthquake safe to the public. I led the fight against Measure 2439. I can tell you it was very important to the public. It had a big impact on the vote. You heard from the last work session, John Hawkins said that his group, which I would say was conservative leaning, recommended 115,000 square foot police facility and seismic retrofitting of the library. This has been the long-standing Salem Community Vision position. You heard from several people at the last work session supporting that. So here is, whoops. It went away. Well, here would be, I see it, but we did a survey to test this. There are 394 responses. Jeff just described these 4 options. actually, they're not including your most recent one. These were two, three by the city, one of Salem Community Division at the top. These were randomized on Facebook. It was also on SurveyMonkey, and I combined the SurveyMonkey responses and Facebook. The same questions were asked. And we see that 66% of the people, 52% plus 14, are in favor of a plan that includes either seismic upgrades to the library or to City Hall. It's interesting that the next, that both of those are, even the 79 million option is more popular than the standalone options down at the bottom, which only attracted about 9%. And then we see that some people don't want a police facility at all. So this shows that seismic retrofitting is important to people. We also, because I was experimenting with Facebook, they have a hashtag survey option where you just put up a post, you ask a question, and then people put yes or no in comments. And this was interesting because we only got 90 respondents on that. It was just for a few days less than the previous survey. And again, 60% of the respondents said that they would like in a May election that the City Council ask voters for money to make the library and City Hall earthquake safe. So what does this mean? What it means is what I said to you in a message yesterday, and I'll just read this for the benefit of the public. Here's how seismic retrofitting of the library and building a 115,000 square foot police facility for exactly the same construction budget as in the city's current plan can be done for $65.4 million, just $1.4 million than the city's budget. And what you do is you save $8.6 million by reductions, as Jeff said, in development costs, escalation, contingency, not in construction. You add in $10 million for retrofitting of the library. The result is $65.4 million. So which is more important, saving the lives of library staff, volunteers, and visitors to the library, including children at story time when the big one earthquake hits, or spending an excessive amount on design and consultant fees, a construction inflation estimate, a contingency reserve far above what Beaverton used in its police facility budget? I think if you did that, voters would be much more likely to approve a bond measure in May. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hines, I'd like you to, no, I have a question. I'm looking at the survey, which by my rough calculations almost adds up to 100% or pretty darn close.
Okay.
My question.
Blame Facebook, I didn't.
Yeah, no, that's, I didn't add the decimal points, but I added the main ones. I guess my question is, did you offer like option 1 and option 2, or they just had to pick one choice?
One choice.
Okay.
One choice.
Okay. So it's hard to say that what the 52% that went for the first choice, whether their second choice might have been the 79 million or something else.
Yes, we don't know.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Suzanne Kaltwasser.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening,
And
Suzanne.
members of the City Council. My name is Suzanne Kaltwasser, and I live in Ward 8. Brian shared with you the results of the poll. What I wanted to share with you was the comments that people added at various different locations on Facebook, and we also put it on Nextdoor. And I sent you a compilation of about 5 pages of comments via an email and have submitted them, so I won't read them all to you. But I came away with 2 observations. One is that a significant proportion of the people that made a comment commented on the fact that they felt strongly that we should be investing in our existing infrastructure before we build something new. People really, I think, are pragmatic in saying, as a community, we put millions and millions of dollars into the library and to City Hall, and we want you to preserve that for us. And the second thing that I noticed was that I didn't list about 12 just flat out no's, because I didn't know what they were saying no to. But I think that this is going to be a hard fought effort to get anything to pass. But I'm hoping that tonight, as you contemplate what bond to actually put on the ballot, that you try to put yourself into the shoes of the average voter. And it isn't really about what do we need, what do we want. It's really about what is the voter going to take the time to open up a ballot and actually put an X on that ballot, close it back up, find a stamp, put it in a mailbox, or go out of their way to put into the ballot box. Because the bottom line is that there's a very good chance you'll get nothing. The public has already said one time, and so turning that around is going to take a lot of effort. And I think that if you put a proposal that is reasonably priced, covers all of the bases, the seismic as well as the new, that you have something that you can take out and really, really, really push hard for, and hopefully we'll all be successful in that. But I think that has to be something that you keep in the back of your minds, that we could end up with nothing as we argue our point, this point, I'd like this, I'd like that. Bottom line is, we need a police station, we need seismic upgrades, we need something that's going to pass.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you. Bruce Bailey.
Good evening, Bruce Bailey, Executive Director for UGM. I want to address the location of the proposed facility. As many of you might know, the Union Gospel Mission is trying to relocate our men's shelter and has been engaged in that effort for a long time. If this proposed facility comes across at the, I think it's called the O'Brien site, it would be right across from the new men's shelter, which in my opinion would be an ideal location. I come from a bigger city in the Midwest, Chicago, and I've been very pleased with the responsiveness of the police department here in Salem. We've had any number of issues, as you might imagine, with people who don't have the social norms that we expect. But the police have been, can I use an old term, Johnny on the spot. When we have needed them, they're very responsive and very helpful. And I think it would be that much better immediately across the street. I think it will bring a lot of crowd control, if you will, from the people that we serve who are on the street. So I'm not talking to myself about the cost of a facility per se, and I don't know if precinct, the issue of precinct is still a question or not. But again, I come from a large city where they use a precinct system, and I can tell you that the response isn't any quicker, at least in that city, from a precinct model than a central model. In my own experience in the short 2 years that I've been here, that the city of Salem police have responded to our needs. So if that's helpful to you, and I know it's a long process, I'm engaged in a process that's not quite as comprehensive as what you are going through, but I sure understand even the need for a 9% contingency. I've been involved in a number of multi-million-dollar projects over the years, and we've always had a 10% contingency. And even if we've not wanted to, we have always found a need to use that contingency. So,
Thank you very much, Mr. Bailey. Any questions? Thank you.
thanks.
Jim Bauer.
Good evening. My name is Jim Bauer. I reside at 1866 Merritt Street South in Salem. I was a member of the Blue Ribbon Task Force, spent about 9 months being a part of that group and listening to a great deal of information about what kind of needs our community has related to police facility. I want to just say today that the issue of seismic versus facility together, separate, was a part of the task force recommendations, and remind you that the task force wanted to have those things separated out because from the perspective of those assembled, and myself included, the police facility is a very, very important facility for our community. The seismic issues were complicated because they represent an opportunity cost to other projects within the city, other ideas, things that people need to be thinking about in a prioritized way. And the idea of moving to the top of the list, the seismic for this facility, didn't take into account a lot of other ideas about what might be needed by our city that are going to require bond financing. The only other thing I'd like to remind you of today is something that you already know, but I think it's important. Any entity who's going to be here forever, like our great city here, all of us in our community, knows that you need to look at the long-term costs of anything, and the life cycle costs are a part of that, but understanding that at this moment, in this period of time, interest rates are at low, which at a time for investment in something that's necessary, like a police facility, this is the time to act. The cost of construction's relatively low and rising, inflation rising, all kinds of things that are going to affect the long-term value of this project are rising as we speak. So on one hand, encouraging you, as others have, to get going on this, but also encouraging you to look at that for what is going to be the investment that's going to last the longest period of time, because you're locking in your price low. And my last thing I'd like to say is to the scouts here assembled, going forward in your life, there's going to be many times when you ask yourself, what can I do to serve? And look around you, people who are citizens. I'm an Eagle Scout, 3 Palms, and I believe in what you're trying to do, and I hope that when you look around this room that you'll imagine yourself coming back here in years ahead and wanting to participate in making your community better. So thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bauer. Any questions? Thank you. John Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm John Hawkins. I live at 5539 Bellflower Court Southeast in Salem, part of Ward 4. I'm a member of the Friends of Salem Police, which is a new organization just formed to advocate for passage of a bond measure should you bring it to the voters in May. Councilor Lewis asked a great question last week of one of our learned speakers on the other side of the aisle, talking about different cost figures supplied by the architects. He asked what makes one architect right and the other architect wrong. According to my friend Dan Wellert, who works at White Oak Construction, the team of DLR and CB2 architects is the only local team on the two sides that is highly qualified in the current Northwest construction market for police facilities of this type and size. With that in mind, I would draw your attention to the spreadsheet in your handout titled Response to Council Questions. This analysis clearly shows that DLR and CB2 and their cost estimates are reasonable and responsible. We've heard a lot of talk lately about how our proposed police headquarters compares with other police buildings around the state. Our friends on the other side of the aisle, again, say we should build based on the models used in Beaverton or Eugene or Medford. But as my other friend Michael Davis says, for goodness sakes, we are in the capital city of the state of Oregon. We have obligations that Medford and Beaverton and Eugene and even Portland do not have. Our police and fire departments protect scores of buildings, they watch over demonstrations, and they fuss over lots of dignitaries visiting our fair city. This is an incomparable place. So let's not get mired in lengthy discussions about whether to spend $1 per square foot here or there. We want a police headquarters that is exceptional, not a Taj Mahal, but a building that is worthy of our great citizens. Certainly, $64, $66, or $69 million is a lot of money. It's tempting to succumb to sticker shock over that many dollars. But we should think about what a modern police facility will mean to our citizens, what it says about the people we have in our well-respected police department and its outstanding chief, and what it says about the relative security we enjoy. When it comes to financial impact on these citizens, our neighbors, we are not talking about millions of dollars in their case. Last week's drafts show $69 million bond measure costs just 17 cents per day. A $64 million bond measure costs just 15 cents per day. This is a modest investment, whichever way we go. And I dare say that our citizens deserve the headquarters building that our chief and his design team envision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming. You indicated that you've got a new group just formed, sir, called the Friends of the Police.
Friends of Salem Police, yes.
Friends of Salem Police, thanks. One of the options in facing the council is a combined bond with some allocation for earthquake seismic retrofitting, at least the library and maybe other parts. Let's say that the council were to end up with some sort of combined bond. I presume that your organization would be out actively campaigning for that bond, just as they would if it was a standalone police station bond.
Yes, Councilor, that's correct. Our organization will campaign vigorously for a measure that you put on the ballot in May, and we will advocate for it as strongly as possible. And we tend to agree that we want the police building first, but if you want to combine it with the seismic, we'd certainly support that 100%. Thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, I'm curious if your group has talked about what a fear threshold would be as far as the price. Is there we just can't go above this price in your mind?
Well, Councilor Lewis, I think that certainly we wouldn't want to go above 82 million because that's what failed last time. And the chief has mentioned time and time again that it would be foolhardy to come in with anything that size again. We need to cut back. The sizes that are proposed now are in the area of 15 to 20,000. I'm sorry, 15 to 20 million dollars less than that, which I think was a good size. I don't know if there's an upper threshold or not in our minds, but certainly the proposals that are before you tonight have a good chance of passage.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kurt Arthur.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Kurt Arthur. I reside at 3750 Augusta National Drive in Ward 7. I'm a commercial realtor here in town, but I'm really more here tonight as a community servant, and I am no way, shape, or form going to stand before you and act like I'm an expert in any of the cost measures that you have in front of you. That is why all of you chose to be elected into these wonderful positions to make this decision. I would tell you that whether it's 46 million or 82 million, we can get this approved, and we can get this approved very easily. One way and one way only. And I'm not only speaking to you tonight, but I'm speaking to every member that's in this room. We all have to be on the same page. There's too much contention. There has been too much contention. There's an old saying that I absolutely love that's called leaders lead, right? That means we have to look at the broad spectrum of what is right for this community, and all of us get on the same page that we can take forth a proposal to provide not only police facilities, whether you choose to go in with one measure or both measures that'll provide seismic. I think if you were to ask the city of Salem, do you want a new police facility and do you want seismic upgrades, 90+% are going to say yes. It's just a matter of how we're going to convey the message. So right now, whether we're going to sit and debate about $82 million or $46 million, I think all of us in this room need to come up with a proposal and be leaders of this community and all get on the same page, sing a little kumbaya, and make sure that we can make a decision that you can put forward a ballot measure in May. It's very important, I think, that we get back out there in May to get this thing done and pass a measure that all of us can get on the same page with, that provides our community the resources that it desperately needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arthur. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. Pam McCauley? Ms. McCauley, that mic right there works if you want to grab that one.
This one?
Yes,
Okay.
There you go.
Pam McCauley. I am here representing the Salem Association of Realtors. Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. My name is Pam McCauley, and I am the President of the Salem Association of Realtors, representing the over 800 members in support of your effort to move forward on a desperately needed police facility for our Salem Police Department. Thank you for the opportunity to comment tonight on the proposal before you. My testimony will be brief, but we thought it was important to be here tonight to publicly voice our support for the council to move swiftly yet thoughtfully through this process so the proposal can be placed on the May 2017 ballot, so as not to compete with other measures likely to be placed on the ballot in the near future. Although we are not experts in the size or the specific details of the facility, we will leave that to the professionals. We do feel strongly that the parking garage component must be adequately built for the staff and visitors of the facility. Utilizing a parking garage that is more than 1 block away for our officers and staff that come and go from work at all hours of the day and night is irresponsible of us to consider. We appreciated the clarification at the last work session explaining why the price per square foot is estimated to be higher than the Beaverton facility due to the inclusion of costly yet necessary features such as the crime lab and the SWAT facility that were not part of the Beaverton facility. I just want to conclude by saying that the realtors love what we do. The opportunity to assist people in realizing the dream of home ownership is a very rewarding career. Yet one of the questions we are asked often of our clients is whether a community or neighborhood is safe. We want to continue answering this question in the affirmative. Salem's existing police facility is not getting any larger, nor is our police force getting any smaller. That is why we urge you now to choose the best path forward to bring this issue to the voters. Thank you very much for this time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Gene Pfeiffer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Gene Pfeiffer, and I'm from Silverton, actually, but my purpose and the thing that drives me is sustainability and fiscal responsibility. I feel that if we are in Houston, Texas, New York, Seattle, or Salem, Oregon, if we're wasting money and not taking care of things that already have usable life, that we're being affected nationwide. In fact, we're being affected worldwide. So that's my reason for being here. I had a thorough review by Steve Belshaw of the facilities. He showed me every closet, every little thing to see. In fact, I thought he was at one point going to lock me in the marijuana room until I came out and agreed with him, but he made sure I saw everything. And
He didn't do that, did he?
We certainly need a relocation of the facility. The thing that troubles me the most, though, is that we are neglecting to take care of what we're in now. Not that this facility itself, the chambers, is so bad. It certainly needs some lateral upgrades, but the facility around us, the Vern Miller Plaza, is deteriorating. It's been doing so since 1972. I personally have observed that. I'm a design build specialist. I've come in here to meet with the building department, plan reviews, meet with the planning department, and seeing stalagmites and stalactites. Someone in their wisdom lately has been having them ground off so you don't see them, but I personally observed them this long. So we have a problem. In 2010, I was on the task force for the courthouse square. I already had a predetermined notion that we could fix it economically. I saw what had happened and presented that and was put on the technical committee as a technical advisor. In that process, for nothing, compared to the Portland consultant that spent $1.7 million to tell us it was going to cost $60 million, Jeff James and I persisted to say, well, this building can be fixed economically, and we got it done for $23 million. The same thing goes for what we're in now. We have an asset that needs to be taken care of. If we keep letting it go, contrary to what was said about we can build a bigger building and it'll be beneficial for us for years, we need to afford to do what we can pay for now and not have something that we let set here and become deteriorating so it becomes so bad we lose it. This asset, this whole block in replacement value is anywhere from 125 to 150 million, and we can't afford to neglect it. And I would like to, the reason you got the map is pointing out that that example is on 4.5 acres, and we're dealing with 3.5 acres. So it shows you what can be done, and I certainly recommend that the police building be 100 feet set back from the streets. Remember Oklahoma. So my final words are, we have something that we're proposing. I'm very much in favor of the bond, but if we keep going forward, we would have something in the end that I would call, and I hate to say the words, but negligent homicide. If we have people die, and we wouldn't have people die just from a 9.0, we could have it happen just with a regular activity with obstructor failing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Pfeiffer? All right, thank you very much. Dan Clem?
Good evening, Mayor Bennett, council members. My name is Dan Clem. I'm a resident of Ward 8. Just want to share 4 thoughts with you tonight. This community strongly appreciates and supports our police department. We have a world-class police department, a world-class police chief. Issues that are happening in communities in other parts of this nation are not happening here because we have such a great approach. They have such a great approach with crime, stopping crime, processing crime, but they've been hindered for many years with the police department that we currently have. But the public knows and has great trust in our police chief and our police force. The second point I want to share with you is that as we look at whatever you approve tonight, that the public is fairly educated on the need for a police department. We've hosted some tours through the police department. Folks have seen that it's really underserving our police officers and our public. As we look at putting out a bond measure that includes the police department and other issues, there's going to have to be a strong education of the public about what the total need is. My third point is we need to quote Suzanne Kaltwasser, who said it earlier, we need to put out a bond measure that's going to pass. And so as you deliberate, consider that there will need to be quite a bit of public education about what it is that we're doing. Putting out 2 things on one bond measure is something that really needs to be done with a lot of education in mind so that the public can see the value in both items on the bond measure. And my fourth point is, do it right, do it tonight.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Clem. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Sorry about the sudden change in light. I just thought it was getting really dim and warm in here. I was starting to... Barbara Weisenhut. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone with... Oh, there you are. Okay, I'm sorry.
Fine. I'm Barbara Weisenhunt, and I own a business here located at 3772 Portland Road. I come to you tonight as a business owner, as a former elected official, and also as a former treasury manager here in the city of Salem, responsible for handling bond issuance. In the role of a former elected official at a local governmental level, I would urge you to take a look and seriously make the decision to break the 2 issues apart. Put police in May, put the issues related to the seismic changes and upgrades at a later date. And I say that because we've done so much. So far, we've made the approach about educating the public and helping them to understand that need. When we put in something new, we make it more complicated for them. We make it difficult for them to understand why we've changed in midstream. And I know from my own experience that it's much easier for the public to understand if we stay consistent in our message. In my next role as a former treasury manager here, responsible for issuing the debt, I also know that it will make the process smooth and easy for us to sell that debt by keeping it very consistent and clean and related to a single project. While it's not impossible to go in or even maybe more expensive to go in and do a single debt issuance right now for both sets of projects, it does make it easy for those who are taking a look at investing because they can understand very clearly what the issues are and what they will be buying and investing in. So again, I believe that there's an advantage to going out and getting those two pieces of debt and doing things separately. And then finally, as a business owner here in town, I would encourage you to push forward, make the decision tonight, put the police department bond separately in May, and the seismic issues, which I do believe we need, and which all of us will help you to get past again at the next opportunity, on the ballot as soon as you can after the May election. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. That was very interesting, your comments on the two issuances being in on different projects. Should you expand on that a little bit? I'm just kind of intrigued by it. Is the debt purchaser looking at the project as well as the stability of the seller? I mean, you know, Salem has a good bond rating.
Salem has an
excellent bond rating, yeah, really.
Yes, we have an excellent bond rating and an excellent reputation. And we consistently go out with bond issuance packages, and I'm sure that's happened in the many years since I've been here, that are clean and easy for people to understand.
Yeah.
They can see that there's been full research done, that we have a decision, that we've come to a decision as leaders and as a community that is supportable and really ready for us to be there to pay back that debt over time. It gives the borrowers and the issuers confidence in working with us. And so by coming in with first good bond results, which comes from clarity to the voters, and then very well-defined issuance packages, I believe, in my experience, that it does make it easier for us to get the issuance and then ultimately the sale at a good rate.
So when you package up a bond like this, is part of it sort of the history of the project, kind of the package? When you describe the package, does it include information on the process that led to the project? I'm just not sure. Does it?
Yes, sir. It includes information about the community. It includes information, quite an extensive detail about the project itself. And it does also include information about the political and business kind of process of getting this through. So if there's been, say, several attempts, we'll mention that. And it's because there's been a history that we then can say we've continued to build the support. We've continued to make sure that the community understands the message, and that when we come to the investors, that we are able to say, this is something that you can buy with confidence, and this is a community that's issuing their debt in a way that makes it a good investment for them and a good investment for us.
So I don't want to belabor this, but I want to understand it, because this is a new piece of information for me. I hadn't heard what this looks like. But so we take a second project and attach it to it. The second project has had one or two public hearings. What does that look like? And minimal engineering. I mean, it's sort of early engineering. What's that look like? What?
The information that's included would be only the information that's available. While most investors or issuers will not go into a process, at least while I was there, would not go into an analysis of their interpretation of whether it's well done or not well done in great detail. I believe that you end up with a more complex process for somebody from the outside to try and understand.
Okay.
So in my experience, and certainly the current administrative staff here at the city would be able to give you more current information about the markets and the situation. But during my years, and that included about 20 years worth of debt issuance activity, what I found was those bonds that we were issuing with single purpose, clearly vetted, fully developed plans that had strong support from our vote, or multiple attempts that showed ongoing and building support, were always the ones that were done most quickly and at the lowest rates, because they were easiest for somebody from New York to understand.
Great. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions? Yes, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you for coming down and explaining this. It sounds like the crucial thing is, one, the city or the municipality's bond rating and history in the past.
Absolutely, Councilor.
Then the second thing would be that the ballot measure and the bond was passed.
Correct, sir.
You know, I think I'll ask Mr. Lacey to comment this at some point, so David, here's just a little heads up. What was your, when you were selling them, where were you doing this?
I was treasury manager here at the City of Salem for 3 years.
Okay.
And then spent a year over in McCall, Idaho as the city treasurer and finance director, and 14 years at Ada County in Boise, Idaho.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. That was very helpful. That's the last person on my list, except for Mr. DeHart, apparently.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. Good evening. My name is Brent DeHart. I'm a resident of Ward 7, and I one time sat and represented Ward 7. So welcome. I want to thank you all for your service. I know that there are many long hours and a lot of work that goes unrewarded at times. The last bond measure, I want you to know I didn't like the price tag. I thought it was really high for what we got for our fire facilities just several years prior. But I voted for it. Because I want what's best for the community, for my kids and for my grandkids. And I was willing to pay for it because I didn't pay for this building and I didn't pay for the Civic Center, or I didn't pay for Salem Center, but I was willing to pay for the next generation, and I appreciate the fortitude it took to put it on the ballot. And I also believe that the city has a long-standing record, whether the public recognizes it or not, of being very good stewards with the public dollar and the bond dollar. I think our Public Works has done a great job with the streets and bridges. I think our fire department did a great job. I think that they've earned a reputation, and I believe and trust in our city manager, Steve Powers, Peter Fernandez, and Chief Moore, that they will be prudent servants of our public dollar. So I'm here to encourage you to get us a police facility. The only unacceptable result out of May is to not get a police facility. It's the only one. So I urge you to do whatever you feel is most likely to end in that result. We have to have it. We'll advocate for you, but that's the only unacceptable result. Is there a seismic need I hear about? I believe that's true as well. And when you put that on the ballot, I'm going to vote for that as well. Because again, I want great facilities for our city for a generation or two. So I'm willing to vote yes, and I hope that you all will have the fortitude to put it back on the ballot in the fashion that you think it's most likely to pass the citizens of Salem who rejected it last time. And if we have to split them up, split them up. If we have to distance them in time, distance them in time. But let's not end up with the unacceptable result of not getting a new police facility for our city. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. DeHart. Any questions for Mr. DeHart? Is there anyone else that would come on down? Thank you very much.
Hi, Mayor and Council. My name is Larry Dahlke, and I reside at 3900 Eola Drive, Northwest, Salem. And I'm a general contractor and here in town, and I've over the last few weeks, actually, I've noticed the increase in our traffic and the growth of this area. And I'm in favor of this new police headquarters going in. And I've had a chance to review the last bond cost and this bond cost. And I feel strongly that they've come back, they've chiseled away at getting it down to a price and getting them the needs that they need. that I'm very much in support of the numbers I saw, and you know, people say, well, they look a little high. I say, you know, if I don't think they're high, I think there's chance for some savings, and that savings could go back towards, I understand, the seismic upgrades. So if there is, but you know, with the right team of people, and I know that CB2, it sounds like, is working closely with the police department stuff. They're going to be good stewards to the money that the city is putting into this, and it's definitely something I think we all need, and we should be, you know, in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dahlke. Are there any questions? Now, Mr. Dahlke, I was just trying to remember, because I've heard, you know, you keep coming up in this discussion, is you put up the state police?
We did.
Yeah.
We did. We also worked on the courthouse square,
right,
with this different groups, and I was honored to be able to save the city with the suggestions of Jeff James and Gene Pfeiffer, using a structural group out of town on that one, using carbon fiber on the structural needs, which I'm sitting back looking at all this thinking, have we talked about the, you know, that carbon fiber and on the repairs of this building? There's a guy, and I've tried to say a few words out there in the community about considering getting this guy named Jay Thomas out from Structural Group, who's free, to come out here and give us his advice. He works with some of the most, you know, world-class structural engineers, and that's what we experienced down at Courthouse Square. And it went very well, and yeah, so back to the state police, we did build that successfully on budget, and it was a good team effort. And I think with the right team, your money's going to be well spent. I think in our industry, people think that sometimes there's a lot of money in our business, and there is, but there's also, you know, we all are stewards to that money, especially with the city, and I think this will be closely watched.
Well, I hope we will hear more from you as we talk about the seismic upgrade of this building. Your expertise, along with others' expertise in this, I think will be really relied upon if we get a chance to do this building and the library soon. How soon is tonight's decision, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Mr. White.
Good evening. My name's Evan White, and I live in Ward 7. I went to nearly all the meetings of the Courthouse Square Advisory Task Force, and I can certify that Mr. Pfeiffer and Mr. James did an outstanding job. I agree with what Mr. DeHart said, that the only unacceptable result is one that doesn't give us a new police facility. I do think, however, that the odds of passing a bond measure would be much higher if you include seismic upgrades to City Hall and the library. And the reason for this is twofold. First, you can paint a picture of little children getting squashed in the library. That's going to bring a lot of people out to vote. And secondly, people can think about, well, gee, what happens if the big one strikes and the bridges are out, there's debris in the roadway, public utilities, water, sewer disrupted. We'd certainly like the Public Works Department to survive the earthquake. So anyway, that's my hope. I promise to work hard to get the bond measure passed, whatever it is, and I hope it'll be on the ballot in May. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right. Anyone else? Okay, very good. Well, we will then end our public comments and then move to councilors. Do any of you have questions for staff that you would like? Okay, Why don't we take a brief recess and we'll come back and finish this off. In our work session, I'd like to again ask if anyone has any questions for the staff Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been struggling with this thing. You know, I like numbers, and the numbers on this thing, the more you look at them, the more cross-eyed you get as you consider how you're going to add this up, whether it's dollars per square foot or it's a square footage of the thing, and then you start comparing other entities and different lots, and it gets really to be puzzling. And so in my simple way, I looked at this thing and I went, again, hung up on I looked at the square footage and I looked at the number, I looked at Beaverton, because to me that's the one we got. If we're going to compare something, Beaverton seems to me to be the one that's the most comparable. And looked at the number of police in there, which was 137, and we're at 190. Did the math, that's 27% more. It multiplied 90,000 times 127, and I got 114,900 square feet.
Wow.
So on square feet, boom, we're right where we're talking about at the 115. But then I look at the price, and I know we got all these extra prices put in here, but they're at whatever they were, 45 million, I think, and we're at 65 million or 64 million. And so that's when I start going, are we getting hung up, and this is my question, when we start analyzing this, is dollars a square foot the best way to start the discussion to arrive at what we need? Or not? What if we just passed a motion that said, okay, you get $63 million to build this. I don't. You got $63 million to build it. How would you then move forward planning it, if that's what we get? Or 59. Let's say we wanted to be retail and go 59, 999, 999 for the the old retailer's coming out at me. But if we did that, what would you go about? How many square feet would it be? How would you arrive at it, and what would we end up with?
But I think to answer the first question, we would proceed very much like we've shared with council, and 115,000 square feet with the program elements. If there was a smaller amount approved by council, we would have to take a look at those program elements. Staff believes it is important to plan for the future, so I would be hesitant to make changes that would reduce the expected life of the facility. Would we look at contingency? Perhaps. That brings some risks, that has some pros and cons that I would want to make sure council fully understood. I don't know, the chief might have some thoughts on that, or Alan Dannon, or CB2. So that's kind of a general response to your question.
Chief, did you want to comment on this, or?
Sure. Good evening, Alan Dannon with Public Works Engineering. So just to amplify on Mr. Power's comments, he's exactly right. We would upon funding the project, work to build the best project that we could with the budget that we have, just like we would if we pass one of the other proposals that are in front of us tonight. The things that we would look at are there parts of the program that we could look to reduce or shrink, and then maybe think about how we could structure the project and the bid to have alternates that the contractor bids on, so that we get more of what we want if there's a good bidding environment. Those are some of the strategies we might use to try to get as much as we can for the dollars that we have. As far as contingency goes, that's really there to help us address risks. So if we're relatively lucky throughout the project, don't encounter any underground contamination or poor soils issues, and that contingency is preserved, that helps us build more building as we design the project. If not, then we have to look at ways to either reduce the size, think about less costly materials that may have higher life cycle costs to work within our project budget. Those would be the kind of options that we would look at.
Yes.
But all that being said, then, if you wanted 115 or 120,000 square feet, with that price, you could arrive at it. You could design something that got you 120,000 square feet.
I think the general answer to your question is yes. We'd figure something out. It just might not be the quality that we're looking for efficient O&M. If we said, yes, we're going to hit 120 no matter what.
You say quality of the building, or quality maybe of the workability, the whatever, ergonomic part of the design, or
I'm thinking more like if you say, okay, size is the number that we're going to hit, then you might have to say we're going to select some cheaper materials in order to hit that size. And what that really means to your overall life cycle of the project is it's going to have higher maintenance costs as you go forward, and that's the trade-off you make to get the size that you need.
The facility stuff always gets short-shifted.
Thank you. Okay for now? Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I have a number of questions, and I guess I'll just ask some of them, and then maybe some of the other councilors.
Just keep going until somebody.
Okay, until somebody interrupts me. Yeah. I want to follow up a little bit on what Councilor McCoy was saying, and this goes back to the first work session we had where the consultants and the task force committee came in and said, here it is, 82.9 or whatever the figure was, and then here are 3 potential ways to cut that down. One was across the board percentage cuts, the other was program cuts, and the other was some combination. And I asked the architect then, well, isn't there a 4th way? And that's what Mr. McCoy was talking about. We say you're going to build it for X dollars, and you build it for X dollars, which, you know, this is probably a poor analogy, but it's like building a home and you say, wow, this is what this is going to cost. Maybe I won't add the 4th bathroom or the 5th bathroom or something else in order to come into what the budget is. You know, that's really not I guess that is a question. And Alan, you've just basically answered it, that if we say we want to do it for X dollars, you could do it, and it might be, you know, it might be a reduction in size, it might be a reduction in square feet per officer, it might be some other reduction. Then I do have some questions for Mr. Lacey if he wants to come up. Sorry, David. You know, I'm looking at your figures on the 3 resolutions. They range from per average cost per month per $200,000 home from $467 up to $633. So it's, you know, $1.60 between that difference. When we were talking about these before, when it was 82 million, it was $9 and something, and we had a conversation then where in actual dollars per month, because of some mysterious thing in the black box that is the bonding issues, it really would come out to about $4.40 or some other figure. So could you explain how you arrived at these figures, and are they the top load figures, or are they something that happens when you put in all the bonding and the finance and these numbers you know, were spit out of the black box?
Sure. Well, David Lacey from Finance, and you're asking a great question as usual, the mysteries of behind financing. So some of the numbers we talked about with the previous police facility, it kind of depends on how you look at debt. So there's different ways to issue debt. You could issue debt as a level debt service payment, so that'd be kind of familiar with your mortgage if you want to look at it that way. So the preliminary numbers with the last police facility, that's, I believe, where the $9 rate came in. It's saying that if we had level debt service, it starts out very high based on where assessed value is, and over time as assessed value grows, that levy rate goes down, so that rate kind of changes. There's a couple other ways to look at it too. You could issue debt as a level levy, so it would essentially be the same levy rate over the life of the bond, and that would result in a little bit higher value each year, because as assessed value grows, those rates go up. So getting complicated, but to go.
Levy, you know, I think of the water spilling over the levee. So could you tell us what LEVY is as opposed to LEVE?
Sure. So to provide the context, so a levy rate is a rate that is charged as far as a tax rate. It's a price per thousand of assessed value for a home. So when we're looking at this bond issuance, we've tried to take a middle-of-the-road approach for these three options and said, what does a 20-year term look like with an estimated interest rate, and coming up with what we're trying to target as a combined and level levy. So saying that our existing debt is there, and it's about that 89 cents or so per thousand of assessed value for a home. And then adding on to it what the additional debt levy would be what we're looking at for each of these values you're looking at. So the way that levy works is that rate would stay relatively the same, but what would happen is as assessed value grows, that debt service payment that we make actually can be a little bit larger each year.
Okay.
So we try and keep the rate of it the same, whereas and it's getting confusing, I apologize.
No, I'm understanding it so far, but I don't know if I want to go any deeper, because then I'll just nod my head and act like I'm understanding it. But what I think you're telling me is these figures that you came at were your educated, experienced assessment of what it's really going to cost, as opposed to what the bottom could be or what the top could be.
Right. It's a middle road approach, and we're working with our investment advisors, Piper Jaffray, to come up with the independent analysis to make sure that, their calculations check out. We've gone through our preliminary look of that, and they've confirmed some of our calculations on this. So as we narrow down to what that option would be, we'll be able to work with them a little bit more fully.
Now, I want to ask you a little bit about selling these bonds on the market, and the woman, I don't think she's here anymore, Barbara, I had her last name written down, Weisenhutt, I thought, yeah. She was talking about, it seems like, at least in my questioning her, it's the city's debt history and bond rating, plus the fact that something passed that are the most important things. And so is there, in your view, a real negative factor if we say some of these bonds, we're going to be selling some bonds for the police station and some for seismic retrofitting? Do you think that is really, given our history and our rating and given the fact that this measure could pass, is that going to unduly hamper your abilities to sell?
Well, it probably depends. I mean, I think there's definitely some validity to the point, and I think it really comes down to the type of pledge. So in this case, we're looking at general obligation bonds, which means it's pledged by taxpayer revenue.
So that's a better deal.
That's one of the strongest pledges.
Better deal than catch me if you can sort of pledge.
So what banks are basically saying, and that's where all these calculations come into play, is that we can levy a tax rate to do that. And I would just say it's probably the comment on that too is what we've been successful with the city of Salem is issuing bonds with categories of assets. So when we look at the streets and bridges bonds, multiple projects, but we're managed within those bonds. This would be looking at, again, categories of assets. So we're looking at city facilities in this case. So from the initial analysis, there may be differences in the amount that we're actually trying to issue, but that would be something that'd be really hard to quantify, how much of a rate difference would be.
I think what you said have been very helpful, and you've actually moved into the next area of questioning. I was going to talk about that, and then I look at the streets and cities bonds, where I don't know what it was for, what was it for, Mr. Fernandez? Okay, $100 million. We didn't go out and sell $100 million a bond right there. We planned our projects, and we sold X percentage of $100 million at one point, and then when that project was done, and when the the indebtedness we're already talking about went down, we might then sell 3 times X percent. So that's, in effect, the same sort of procedure that you would be doing if you had bonds for the police station and bonds for a library seismic retrofitting.
Right, and it probably gets even more complicated than that, because when we look at a police facility.
Well, I
too-
hope so.
Yes, but when we look at a police facility or any bond issuance, we're looking at cash flow. So in our policy C2, our debt policy,
Sure.
we talk about issuing just-in-time financing. So even in this case, we would look at the cash flow, probably do one issuance for an initial amount, and then as the project continued, we'd issue it differently. So that's why it gets a little difficult to talk about what the levy rate, in this case is. It'd be what we'd be targeting, but we're not going to be issuing the debt all at once.
But I guess I'm going back to, and then I think I'm done with questions of you, is that the important, other than in addition to the two factors I mentioned of city's rating and the fact that the measure passed, it's important what we're securing that debt with, as it were, and the time of what we're securing the debt with is general obligation and taxpayer money, and that's the best security that some bank or financial institution that's going to buy the bonds is going to be looking for.
Right, and they'll go through the same process they have with our other bonds. Like recently, we've been rated again by S&P for our Streets and Bridges bond with a AA rating.
Okay.
And they'll look at the different things about the economy, as the former Treasury or supervisor had mentioned as well. They're going to look at the strength of the economy. They're going to look at our employment mix. They're going to look at our budget strength and liquidity, look at our fund balance, a lot of the things they generally do as part of that. But in reality, voters are approving a debt, and that's essentially what we're talking about tonight. One of the options that's picked would be what the voters would approve, and then structuring that would be the portion of it that comes up after that.
And I presume that you have confidence that whatever we go forward and whatever the voters approve, you and your department would have the ability to go out and get the best deal you could and sell these things.
And that would be our goal, working with our investment advisors and bond counsel.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I have more questions unless somebody else wants to take a crack at things now.
Oh, you go on ahead.
Okay, thanks. Now I've got one for the city attorney. I'm looking at the resolutions, and there's the ones that call for the most costly standalone, and the one that calls for the ones that call for all three of the most costly standalone and the together bond talk about a resolution of the city of Salem calling a major election, but the one that talks about if we were to go to a bond measure in November, which would be on the library, if we separate them out and go police station, then library, the resolution says, a resolution of the city of Salem, Oregon, declaring city's council intent to submit to the voters, which is different language than calling for that we see in the calling a major election. I wonder if you could comment on that.
We were trying to draft that consistent with the motion that council adopted, and given that the different city facilities were a part of that, with not having clear idea of how much those were going to cost and what the scope of that was going to be.
Okay.
As I understood council's intent, it was that you wanted to make clear to the voters that you're going back out in November.
And now I see that, Mr. Atchison, when I look at the penultimate line. I've been using that word, and I'm going to continue to use it till somebody tells me to stop. But the penultimate line and stop, yeah, in all, the next to the last sentence in the all caps, it says public library, civic center, and city shops. So you drafted it as the broadest possible in accordance with the motion as amended the last meeting. So let me ask it this way. If we were to just say we want the library to go on the ballot in November without the city shops and without the city hall thing, the language would be the same. Calling, rather than declaring council's intent, the language would then be calling a major election.
Exactly.
And the reason I say that is, there's some concern in the community that we really need to be serious about the seismic retrofitting, and just saying, oh yeah, we're going to do something, and it's our resolution, we might do something. We could lock this in by the language that is in the other measures.
So process-wise, if you were to adopt a resolution, tonight or this month, directing us to go out with a bond for seismic upgrades to whatever facilities at the November election, we would go forward with that. We wouldn't have to submit that
No,
to the
we'd have
county
some time to
until,
work on the language and
August.
other things, yeah, but we would at least say that council is going to do this, not the council intends to do this, or, gee, it would be a good idea. We'd actually be locking ourselves into doing something, with the caveat, I suppose, that we can always change our mind, but we can change our mind on almost anything. And sometimes we do.
Quick follow-up to that, because this is a question I got posed by somebody. If we pass kind of a binding resolution like that for this body, when the special election happens in March, does that change that resolution?
The March election wouldn't have any.
It wouldn't have any
difference.
effect on it.
The way the election calendar works, there's an appeal period for a ballot title that, once you adopt a resolution, that directs me to draft the ballot title. That has to be published. There's an appeal period. So your final action basically has to take place February 27th is your last meeting. The actual deadline's March 3rd. But
as far as that resolution being binding to this specific body, would that specific body change by adding another
it's
member?
binding until you change it.
Okay, thanks.
Did you have a question?
Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and the will of council at any time, depending on what motions are made and when. Sometimes there's a 6-month gap before you can actually tear something down that you did before.
One small point of clarification is that the deadline to submit this to the county is, I think, March 13th. That's also the deadline to withdraw it from the ballot. So after
Correct,
that,
but in regards to a resolution, for November.
Yeah, but for the May election, March 13th is drop dead date. So once it's submitted
So we
by
can
that date,
change our minds at all once it's gone to somewhere. But if we say by the end of the year we're going to do this, we could always change our mind if we found some reason to. We can't lock ourselves away from that, just like you can't bind a future council and bind this council into the future if our brains happen to change. That being said, question in the same light. So this November resolution piece, would it be included in any explanatory statements that went out, or would it just live here?
The plan, at least my plan in drafting, it would just live in this resolution as council's declaration, not as part of an explanatory statement for a different measure.
And then going back to kind of a discussion that Councilor McCoy and I were having during the recess, and you talked about it with his question a bit at the beginning as well. The explanatory statement will not include any square footage at all. It'll only include a dollar figure.
Most likely not. That's correct. It will identify the location, the O'Brien site.
Okay.
That's good.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. So this question is also for Mr. Atchison. How much time would you need to draft an additional resolution based on what we've heard tonight? Or I know Councilor McCoy had talked about if we just do a cap, how much would that?
Depending on what the nature of it is. I mean, we could do it overnight. That's not a problem.
Okay, so we'd still be in time for the deadline. We're not limited by what's here.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. Feel free to break in at any time, rest of the council. And we've got a lot of information that came into us with the great answers to the various questions, and then we have more stuff that came in today that were some citizen comments that we might want to look at. So let's say we're not going to make a decision tonight, but we're going to make a decision next Monday at the called meeting. I see the mayor wants to say something. You could have enough time to do the legal work necessary. That's all I'm asking.
Correct.
I think what would be asked for tonight, councilors, is real clear direction as to where we're going. We can't be, we got to be closer than the ball field we're going to have to be on base.
I agree, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
And that's what I tried to do last week to get rid of the 60.
And I thought you got us there. I'm pretty much ready to go. So.
Okay. Now I have a question for Mr. Danner. There's two parts to the earthquake proofing, seismic retrofitting of this whole complex. One is the library, and one is where we're sitting right now, and the U-shaped building that surrounds this. I see a potential problem if we were to ever look at doing the whole Civic Center complex, library, city hall, council chambers, at once, because we can't do anything with seismic proofing the city hall complex until the police leave. Right. And the police aren't going to leave until however long it's going to take to build their new station. And I would presume we're talking about a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, I don't know.
Closer to 3.
Okay, so then that leads me to another comment, and that to me, because there's been some people saying, well, the lives of the people who work here in City Hall and people who visit here are just as important as the lives of people in the library. But as a practical matter, we can't do this until after the police leave, while we could do the library at an earlier time.
Correct.
Okay, so that to me is a reason why we might want to separate that. And I don't know who to ask this question, but it's attachment 1, questions and answers to what was given to us today, or I picked it up this afternoon. I think it was ready today or maybe yesterday, as opposed to the new attachments.
Yeah, 2 sets of questions.
Yeah. There was something new. I scanned them. I did not peruse them when we looked at that.
Are you saying you need more time?
Well, I am.
Okay.
That's why I asked the question about what if we did it next week. Sure. But I agree. We need to. We need to
tighten it up.
We need to, narrow the issues down tonight. So my question is, answer number 2. What is the building square footage and estimated cost if 500 square feet per officer is used? And I would echo Councilor McCoy's comments that, we don't want to get down in the weeds here. And then one of the witnesses, I guess they're witnesses.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm a lawyer here. One of the citizens who testified said we don't want to get mired in the details, and we certainly don't. But having said that, I'm miring myself now. I look at the first paragraph. If we go to 1 officer per year, which is the figure used at the $63 million figure, it said 110 square foot building for a total project cost of 61.8. How is that different than the 63 that the resolution says? Is it 63 or 64?
30 years. Is the difference.
Okay. Well, no. It says 30-year growth rate of 1 officer a year would result in a 110,000 square foot building at a total project cost.
20-year build out.
I'm looking at question 2, a 30-year growth rate.
I can answer that question, Council.
Well, good. I thought you could.
The difference there is we set the square foot per officer at 500. And with the prior question at 20 years, or the resolutions drafted for 30 years, it's a roughly 522 square feet per officer.
Then I think it's my final question. You should be so lucky when a lawyer says just a few more questions.
We're making progress here.
I've totally forgotten my question now.
Well, think about it.
Yeah, I will.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, and actually part of it just got answered in regard to the time delay before we could really do anything with Civic Center. And then we really don't have a good handle as to where we're going with Shops Complex yet either.
Right.
To where I would see, especially listening to Mr. Dulke as well, that there might be some other options available for City Hall. I don't know of potential for the library as well, but if we know in looking at our bond strategy over the course, it's going to have the Civic Center, including the library, and city shops somewhere down the line for seismic reinforcement, because it's not a question of if it will happen, it's when it will happen, and we will be subjugated to a Cascadia event. hopefully our facilities are ready in time for that.
Hopefully, we're not sitting in this room.
Darn tootin'. So we'll get them all. It doesn't matter if we sell them as a large group or we sell them in small units, especially if there's other things that we're going to be competing for in November. As a matter of fact, and I think I mentioned it in the last one, it will look
pretty good.
In comparison to some of the other things that may be on the ballot, and timing of the projects overall, I don't have any problem with going out for a bond every 6 months on a election, We'll still get to the same place. It's what the community can handle, and as we move that levy rate at 89 or 101 or 125 or 142, if depending, to me, the most important element is making sure we get a police facility. When you actually take something to the voters, especially if it's smaller in size regarding seismic, that's a no-brainer as well as a police facility. And I go back to that statement before, if you mix them, what are you guys doing? You're bringing the price back up. A lot of people just looked at a price. They'll just look at a price again and not really go in depth to it. They're looking at how much will this cost me.
Councilor McCoy.
There's a question. It's language, but it struck me as curious. Under the staff report on Resolution 2017-18, it says, library structural improvements to Salem Public Library to allow the facility to better withstand a large earthquake. Better. I thought it was to be able to be standing and safe, A, and B, is that the large earthquake is what? Is larger?
Fire Chief.
Here we go.
Good evening, Mike Niblock, Fire Chief. So it's all relative. We've never experienced a 9.0 earthquake. That's what they're predicting could happen if we have the subduction zone earthquake off the coast, and that's 5 to 6 minutes of severe shaking here in Salem. So there's a scale that you build buildings to. The police facility, like we're talking about, would be built to what's considered S1, which is immediate occupancy after an event, so that you can immediately occupy. The building will be structurally sound. There may be some cosmetic damage, but you can still occupy and use the building. So that's important for hospitals, fire stations, police facilities, those kind of critical infrastructures that are going to be there to take care of people after an event. The library building would be retrofitted to what's called life safety, which is people will be able to exit the building safely, but the building will not be ready for use until it's cleared by an engineer, a structural engineer, and it may take some time for it to be repaired prior to it being used again. So that's a different level. It's much more costly to do the S1 rating, the critical infrastructure, and certain buildings are required to have that, like I mentioned before. Other buildings are at the lower rating, which is the life safety rating. So there's 5 ratings on that scale. Life safety is number 3. There's another scale up from that, which is a structural performance option, which gives you a little more structural performance. It's all about cost. The higher you go up that scale, the more it costs you. And I'm not an engineer, but the more it's going to cost you. I got one sitting next to me. The more it's going to cost you to go to the higher rating. So that's just something to consider when you think about that. It's about life safety for this structure in the library.
Yes.
So again, I mean, we keep hearing we're doing this to be able to, whether it's just remain standing while people exit or remain functional. The Cascadia big earthquake, do they not rate that based on the Richter scale? So it's going to withstand a 9, or it's going to withstand an 8, or it's going to withstand a 7?
Well, again, I'm not a seismologist or an engineer. I can tell you that the S1 work that we had done in our fire stations was based on a 6.4 earthquake. Yeah. So a 9.0 is significantly higher than a 6.0.
Sure it is.
But you can kind of think about it this way. You'll look across Salem and you'll see the police department standing there as the tallest building in town.
Well, the only building in town. I guess my question, though, is this whole brouhaha is over withstanding a Cascadia 9.0 earthquake, and if, I mean, maybe we came to this a little late, if in fact I'm hearing maybe we can't attain that or we can't guarantee that. What's the discussion about here? It's 6.4. Heck, we had that little one here 10 or 20 years ago. That was a 5 point something.
I think what you're looking at is developing our buildings to a standard which does not, they were not built to meet, and we are upgrading them to a standard that'll allow people hopefully to escape. I serve on the Capital Planning Commission. One of the things we're looking at is having one building to be the seat of government after a major earthquake. Like that, a 9.0 type earthquake. The buildings just don't exist at that level. This building, I think they're really looking at seriously building toward that level of safety. This is real iffy stuff, isn't it, Chief? I mean, this is real.
We don't have 9.0 earthquakes really to compare against.
Earthquakes around the world that often, so. Yeah.
Councillor McCoy, with respect, I would want to remind you the difference between a 5 and a 6 is actually quite large, even though they seem like the same number. Yes. And also, Chief, I know that you're not an engineer, but the shape of the library building, I know that staff did come back, and as far as retrofitting the current library building to bring it up to modern standards for a building of that level, I think the S2 is what you said, so that it wouldn't collapse.
S3
with
would be life safety standards.
S3 life safety. And that was in our planning session as well within council. The work required would not be that much because it's a big box. It's not the glass windows was the more expensive part that I remember staff saying.
I'm not an engineer, so I can't really comment on that. What I will tell you is our fire station was built the same time as the library and the Civic Center, and we retrofitted a 30,000 square foot building, and it was just about $1 million. So there was a lot of additional concrete pilasters that were put in to secure the building. We lost a lot of window space that's filled in with concrete. So there was a lot of work done to the structure, the roof of the building to bring us up to that S1 standard. So it's not as, and library's a lot larger square footage than the fire station is. So, but I can't comment on what they would have to do that.
Yes.
Oh, I just have a couple of statements,
Sure.
but go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
After you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I tell you what, I'm ready to start kind of moving us toward a decision. So not a final decision, but toward a decision aiming us forward. So you go ahead if you have questions.
I would just really like to point out that I think it's vital that we get support from library users. I don't see this passing without support, and I would like to remind council that our library is one of the busiest libraries for programs, definitely in the region, but certainly in the state. We have tons of people that come of mixed backgrounds and different demographics. It also addresses critical communication and sheltering needs within the area, and I know homelessness is something that the mayor has talked about because it serves as a critical service for education and needs in our area. I just really strongly want to point out that it's important that we reach out to those people at the library. I understand in speaking to the presentation tonight that there's many deferred maintenance issues. City Manager Powers said it best that we've got some difficult choices, and because of the recession that we have gone through or coming out of, we've had to stretch things until we've had the money to be able to put forth a bond or be able to do better. And I know, as Councillor Nanke pointed out, the failure of the previous bond cost has come up plenty of times. But I also know from talking with people in my ward, people want services. And I think, as speaking to the priorities that City Manager Powers talked about, is it possible we can stop pitting services against each other and view this as a path to show that we're all in the same boat, and where the services of the police and the library and the fire and council, we all serve the people that live here together. We're all in the same boat, just like the taxpayers. And in passing a bond, we'll give the opportunity to say that no one person or one department or one group of people is going to give the city what it needs to thrive. It's all of us. So we listened, and we recognize that there's lots of economic issues at play, whether or not people can afford the bond. But I don't see it being in our interest with the numerous amount of delayed maintenance that's on board to delay further. And I understand the police is a top priority, but I think that it's critical that we show we're all in the same boat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very good thoughts. Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. The first goes back to attachment 1 with the building square footage, estimated cost of 500 square feet per officer is used. And just to clarify that final number, the final 500 square feet per officer would be in 30 years, correct? Am I correct in that?
Yeah. That's right.
Okay. I just wanted, that was a point of confusion I had when I watched the work session that we had last time was, is that 500 today or is that 500?
Yeah.
Well, there were many, but the other question I had was, and I know this was answered a bit in another attachment, but why is the contingency fund 9% versus something lower? Is that a number we typically use in our construction projects, or is that, how is that derived?
Sure. So typically at this stage, we'd want to be at least 10%. That's what we would look at.
At this stage of design, which is less than 5%.
Correct. Right. When we're putting together projects for the CIP, for example, and we've got just an idea of the scope and have taken an engineering analysis to kind of say, okay, this is what we're looking at and this is what the elements might be, we'd want to have at least 10% and continue. That would be the bare minimum. And then when we get to bid, where the design is complete, 5% is kind of considered the minimum. The reason why we are at 9 right now, we were at 10 with the $82 million proposal. I think it's just been reduced because 9 and 10 was always kind of on the table through that discussion. On a project this large, 9% is a considerable amount, so you have some cushion. But there are a number of unknowns, and I touched on them earlier. We don't own the property yet, so we haven't done any analysis of the soils, anything more than just paperwork review of the environmental possibility of contamination for the site, and any other number of issues that can arise either during design, whether it's regulatory changes, market shortages, sharp material increases. All those things can impact us, and we're starting at a point where we don't have any of that defined. So that's what goes into the development of that number.
Okay.
Councilor Lewis.
One question on cost, and I understand that there have been meetings, maybe several meetings between the staff and the proponents of another Plan B, the Salem Community Vision. And I looking at the staff report and looking at the most recent information from Salem Community Vision, I don't see any changing in either stance. So can you tell me the result of those meetings? Was it basically agree to disagree?
Sure. So we met over the course of Friday and today to review the differences between the two proposals, as you noted. And I think the intent, at least for me, was just to try to, one, explain how the numbers that we have were derived and what's behind them, just like the contingency that we just talked about, which is one of the main areas of differences, and to try to hear that from the other side as well. And acknowledge at the beginning that it might be an agree to disagree kind of situation. I think the things I can say that we agree on is there's going to be an obvious need for dedicated effort to make our dollars stretch as far as they can and to use creativity and innovation where possible to do that. Everybody agrees that we're going to have to set a budget figure and stick to it. Where we disagree is what's the approach to get there. Do you set a low price and aggressively figure out a way to get to it? Or do you determine what it is that the project is meant to achieve, what it is you're going to promise to the taxpayers that you're going to get done, and what does it realistically cost to do that, and how do you deal with the risks between now and then. That's really where the difference lies, and the differences between the two estimates mostly have to do with how you deal with that risk.
One more question, if I could, and that's the pricing that we received at the last meeting on the improvements to both the library and the Civic Center here, this building. And there are amounts for the seismic improvements, and there are also amounts for the needed maintenance. Explain to me again how and why it's so important to do them together, recognizing that we could do them separately, but why is the recommendation to do them together?
I think the biggest reason is economies of scale. If you're going in to impact a structure, when you're done, you've got to restore that structure. When we come back later to do deferred maintenance that we don't get done with the seismic, we're going to again re-impact that structure and then have to restore it. So that's the biggest thing is just the efficiency of doing as much work as you can at that time while you're disrupting operations in the facility. The other is just a practical matter of as you're disrupting systems that are at the end of their useful life, whether they be plumbing, electrical, HVAC, and changing parts of those, you're connecting back to elements that are essentially ready to fail. So it just doesn't feel like a great use of funds if you can avoid it. I guess the last thing I would throw in is replacing elements like windows. Have a seismic component. The existing windows aren't tempered, and so there's a risk that during an earthquake those would shatter and potentially be a hazard to folks who are in the building. If your intent is to seismically upgrade the building, it would be good if you can afford it to mitigate that risk from the glass as well.
Ms. Hanson, did you want to comment?
Sure. Hi, I'm Mina Hanson. I'm the director in charge of facilities for the city. And I wanted to talk a minute about some of the deferred maintenance. Over the last, throughout the recession in the last number of years, we have really put off some of the larger projects. Facilities is funded through the general fund, which means that every year we spend down our budget, and there's not the budgetary authority for us to do some of the larger projects. So when we start talking about some of these big projects, if you start diving into doing seismic, for example, at the library, I think the expectation would be then when we were done and people moved back in that the roof wouldn't leak. Right now the roof leaks. The roof leaking is going to cost about $950,000 to repair. The physical plant for the library, for this building, and for City Hall sit beneath us. So the water lines that go out to the library and the heating and the transformer for the library sit underneath us. So those are some things we have to take into consideration. In addition, we have some very large ADA projects that, because we haven't done large construction, are grandfathered in and we haven't had to replace. The minute we start doing a large construction on any of these, we will need to bring our ADA compliance up to full compliance. We're not there. So you have to start thinking about how all of these things interconnect and touch each other, and why sometimes we're going to need to look at that deferred maintenance list and some of those very large items on the deferred maintenance list. And when you start talking about the seismic elements, if we're talking about, for example, the canopy over Civic Center, that's one of our major seismic elements that would have to be upgraded. If we just remove that plexiglass or that film that's on the canopy, now we've opened the atrium up, and now we have to address the additional heat load on the building. And our system, we can no longer get parts for it, so we just kind of keep it patched together. So I think it's important to understand that these things can't really be split apart. They are all kind of interconnected as much as we would like it to be different.
And one last question, if I could,
Yes.
and this might be you. The resolution number 2017-18, the seismic improvements, it spells out the dollar amounts for the library and civic center, but it's not as clear on the city shops, and I recognize that there is still a master planning being done, so that's my first question. When is that anticipated to be done? And the funds that pay for this may come from somewhere else. intriguing to say the least. But I'm curious if that is for whatever the city shops could be, or is there a need to add a figure for those as well?
Currently, there's a work in progress with Alan and the Public Works Director and facilities and the other occupants of the shops complex to come up with an updated master plan. There was a shops master plan completed some years ago, and we have committed to updating that, and it is in process. Many of the buildings on the shops complex are very old. There's some significant dry rot. There's some significant roofing problems. Most of them at this point would probably be better off raised, and we're looking at how do we build a new building that would house the occupants of the shops complex, because it's a very diverse group. There's public works, there's fleet, there's facilities. So how do we develop a shops complex that meets all those needs into the future and provides sufficient parking for all of the equipment that we have on site? So I think we're 2-3 months out maybe from having a good, we hope to have it by the end of the year. We're running a little behind, but we are looking at an entire shops master plan update from the one that was done approximately 10 years ago.
And so as far as funds to pay for that, it depends on how much it'll cost.
Correct.
Okay, so 2 to 3 months.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak to the roof for just a minute. My favorite subject. So I know that when we do the upgrades, we bring them to the current standards. And have we looked at all about cost-saving opportunities for reimbursement through energy savings or the possibility of solar? And is that in turn taken into account in the cost?
So we do look at where we can get energy grant money back on our projects. We frequently don't know until we have it spec'd out, and I'm not the expert on this, so because then we have to apply for those based on the design. So they are not included in the cost for the roofing that you see there, because we would have to look at, particularly like with solar, and I'm not an engineer, we would have to look at that. Would probably change the quote we have for the roof, because we'd have to put a different type of roofing system on. The roofing system we have on there now is really not intended for that kind of weight, so we'd have to, there's a lot of things we'd have to look into it. So the short answer is no. Could we look at it? Yes, and we always look for energy grants when we do work.
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we probably have exhausted this evening's set of questions. Maybe we could begin a process of figuring out what our resolution might look like. Have you got a plan?
Well, yes, I do. No surprise.
You look like a man with a plan.
Yes. A man, a plan, a canal, Panama.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, yeah. I'm a little unclear, City Attorney. As you know, I know we're not making final decisions now, but I can move to remove some of these options, yes. Correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I think what would be helpful is to...
Yeah, okay.
I'll just tell you what I think would be helpful is just a matter of, before we start making motions, where are you going?
Okay, here's where I'm going.
Okay.
I would like to end up getting rid of resolution number 2017-19, which is a $69 million bond measure. I'm repeating what I said last meeting because I don't think anybody's really talked about that. I frankly, along the lines of Councilor McCoy, I'm interested in looking at it, not getting down into the weeds, and I had some other weeds questions that I deferred.
Good.
But I look at this, you know, the square footage, under answer 2 to question 1, attachment 1 is building out 30 years. It's $61.8 million. And then I look at that, there's $4.5 million in contingency, and that could easily be moved down a bit, like $1.8 million. So I'm very interested in coming along and saying, build the police station for $60 million, and there's the contingency issue, there's some parking issues, there's all sorts of things that
Let me check with you, because I heard this a little bit, maybe a little differently, and I want to make sure we're all talking the same language here on contingencies, that we're talking at this point about a contingency based on a 5% engineering or design, and that
We went down.
what was it?
5% design down.
The mayor is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought I was, but correct me. I can tell you will.
And vice versa.
Yeah, but we've got a contingency that will go down as the improved design, as the design goes up, and we know more about the site. And I'll tell you what I keep thinking of, and maybe no one else ever noticed this, but we're out on Broadway. We've got a developer building out there near where Salem Cinema is today. He digs down a few feet and hits a boxcar unanticipated in the dirt. And it was a high cost to him. We had to actually backfill for lack of contingency. That is not unreal in the location. Remember, DeLon is within feet of the beginning of this city. There is so much stuff underground. I just ask you to be careful with contingencies as a matter of setting them today, but rely on these guys to reduce them.
I agree, Mayor. And the contingency, yeah, that I was getting too much in the weeds there. What I'm saying is there are a lot of things, contingency, parking, et cetera, that might lead me down to what I'm interested in. I'm interested in my first crack at this would be a $60 million police station and a $15 million library retrofitting bond for a total of $75 million. And the reason I say that is the concern that members of the public who aren't as wonkish about this as we are going to see 82.9 to 79. You know, didn't they listen to us the first time? And I think we can get around that some ways by, for example, in the ballot measure, we would say that the ballot measure is to retrofit, seismically retrofit the library and build a new police station. I mean, have it so that's the first thing we talk about. There's other things that can be done.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, but my point is, I think, my point is that 79 million to 75 million is another cut that I think looks
Well,
good.
that's not the bond measure, though. Are you saying then the two go out together?
Yes.
That,
okay. Yeah, that would be.
That's a threshold issue. Can't
yes,
get out
it
here
is.
I would second.
Yeah, well, we're not having a motion, yeah, but I agree. We have to decide that do they go out together or separate, and I'm still together right now, but I'm together with the lower cost. Whether I would be together with the 79, I'd like to think about that a bit based on all the material we've just got.
Well, do you want to, I mean, I don't know how we're going to measure this other than begin motions, but I'm not sure you have the votes to put them together.
I may not, and
Yeah.
you know, that's fine. And so, but I could start this right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Why don't you make
Yeah, I move that at the next council meeting of the February 27th, we we consider placing on the ballot measure a combined bond of $75 million, with 60 of that being for the police station and 15 million being for the library.
Second.
Okay, second by Cook. Councilor Lewis.
I heard over and over and over again, $82 million, too much, too much. There needs, in my opinion, there needs to be a significant difference if the voters are going to approve anything. And by significant, 64 million to me is higher than what I think that is.
So are you saying to separate the?
Councilor McCoy?
I agree, and I also am still not convinced that we need to couple those on one, put the police facility and the library together on one ballot. I think it was too big. We learned our lesson. We need to be prudent and cut that down, and how we reach that is one thing. I'm totally in favor of having So I'll vote no on this motion. I'm totally in favor of placing one ballot in May for the police facility and another one for the library in November. Totally comfortable voting for that, but I'm not going to vote for this.
Yeah. I'll go along with McCoy on this. Councilor Kaser.
I've talked with a lot of people over the last week about this. I've sent out emails to groups of people, neighborhood associations. I've talked with people personally and over the last few months. And the consensus, at least, well, not consensus, a large majority of people in my ward want to see seismic to the library. And I've heard that. I've received emails personally. At this point, I don't even know how, dozens of emails. And it's tied together in people's minds, whether or not maybe that's logical. It's tied together, and it has been over the last few months. So I've also heard people say, I will not support a bond. I support the police. I will not support a bond if there is no seismic to the library at the very least.
Okay.
So what I heard tonight from some of the testimony was encouraging. We had several people stand up and say, we'll support it regardless. We just want a police facility. We had the newly formed Friends of Salem Police. They've said that. They've said, public education is very important regardless of where we land on this. So the realtors group said the same thing. I feel like we would have support from groups, and if we could get other kind of public, people to publicly pledge that too, then we could make a lot of headway in terms of education to pass that.
Okay. Councilor Cook.
You know who's really great at educating is librarians and people in the library. I just want to remind, I know that people are still on the fence, but just think about what we're telling people in the community with this project. Every part of the city touches somebody's life. So there are many people that hopefully will never have contact with law enforcement, hopefully will never have contact with fire. And for those people, they might have contact with the library. They might have contact with city services. I just think it's really important that we remember what we're telling the community, that we're making investment in them with this bond. And I would strongly encourage council to support library with the police on this, because if you look at it strictly as an element of safety, there's so much prevention that's in stake when you're talking about early childhood education, literacy, lifeline communication services for people that are homeless, warming, all kinds of, it's a living room for the community. And it's also something that if we don't, just as the people testified today, when these deferred costs are let go for periods and periods of time, if the roof goes further and we haven't invested it, now we've got another problem that we have to react to, and we can't be proactive. This is our chance to be proactive. This is our chance to send a positive message into our community. Thank you.
One question I've got, and maybe you can kind of help me out with it, is we're talking 7 months difference. So apparently the two, is it that the library can't make it alone, or is it the police can't make it alone, or is it that this has been oversold in people's minds, that there's something going on here that really never happened? But I can see from what you described earlier, I thought we had a pretty solid agreement. That library goes out in November.
Yeah, no, well,
but you're saying now it's got to somehow ride with
well,
the police, or?
Go ahead.
I think it relates back, and I know I talked with Director Fernandez about this. I know, and also City Manager Powers, our city has an excellent track record fiscally. The Streets and Bridges bond, the great rating, we're able to come in under costs. But when I talk with people in my ward, the fiscal issue is important. We have a lot of people on PERS, that decision's waiting, state budget, federal budget, everybody's kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. But the bigger issue than finances is trust. So if you tell somebody, oh, it'll be on the next one, in the back of their minds, they're thinking, well, what's going to happen between now and then that we have to wait in line? And I don't believe you. I don't believe that it's going to come in at this cost. I was really happy to hear the staff testimony tonight about how we arrived at the figure about how much it's going to cost people. Because you're right, Councilor McCoy, when people hear $82 million, in their mind, it's, well, how much is that going to cost, and how do I know what to budget for? Because people do want to support the services, and they're living in the city, and they want to be a part of it. But, I mean, I think that the larger issue fiscally is what's going to happen next? What's the next acts for us? We passed this bond. What's the next bond? I mean, Councilor Nanke said, I'm comfortable passing a bond every 6 months. I think my ward would like to know what those bonds would be and how much they're going to be so that they can pass this one.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick one, because I think our Finance Committee meeting minutes were sent, and it shows kind of an order, but it hasn't progressed to the extent to where we brought it forward for some kind of council approval. Again, we can't bind a future council out beyond, but we can say, this is what we consider the best strategy right now, and start moving that way.
That would be
And we had seismic versus fire equipment in the next grouping, and if we only do part of the seismic, i.e. the library at 15 million, that we just need to shift how that looks over time to keep that flat line that Mr. Lacey talked about on a flat levy, which is also why prices wouldn't necessarily reflect, since we've been hanging on the $1.01, it wouldn't increase to the amount that
And
they spoke of.
Cook,
So.
did you want to speak?
in the staff, oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
In the staff questions, it also said the school bond would be coming out, we're thinking, in November. And so there's all these moving parts, just as the staff had mentioned with facilities, just like mine had said, they're all linked whether we like them to be or not, because one can't function without the other. If I can't pay my water bill and don't get my water, these things are all important, and it requires this prioritization, and I think that this is the right choice to pair the library. There are a lot of families, a lot of grandparents, a lot of retirees. I really think that it's a smart move.
I'll take a stab at answering your question, too, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
I just want to figure out who's carrying who here, that's all.
Yeah. Well, I made the motion, last meeting, whenever that was.
Last week.
To separate them out, because I needed to see what would happen. And I'm trying to do due diligence and discuss, and we've had other discussions about larger things that I don't even bring to the council for various reasons. But now I've heard people, and I've seen them discuss this, and this is my view of what the best thing to do, because in my personal opinion, based on what I've heard of the community, it lost because of cost, and it lost because of no library earthquake proofing, and it lost by 4 percentage points. And so all that needs to happen is we have to swing 3 of those, and it's a winning ballot measure. And so I'm trying to get the cost down low enough, and to also have the library in, because I think those are the two issues.
No, and I certainly respect all of your political analyses from your wards. I look at it citywide. I didn't hear that at all.
Yeah.
That is not at all the political message I heard. But,
Sure. Well, then we can vote on it, and then we can move on, but, that's my best.
Yeah, no, but I think it's interesting. Yeah, Matt.
Can I ask a question? So if we did something like this, where we put out a bond for 75 million or whatever it is, can we not say that, if we need, the police needs to be 60 or 64 or whatever, and the other part is to the library or to the civic center or whatever, is that something that's movable, or do we have to say it's exactly 60 for the police station, exactly 15 for the library?
Well, the measure itself is just basically a one sentence, so we would just have the total dollar amount. We wouldn't be required to put that information in the explanatory statement, but if that's council's direction, we could.
What are you thinking, Matt?
Well, I was wondering what people would think of if we're asking the police station amount to be cut a little bit, maybe cut a little bit off the library too, to make it a little bit lower, to make it seem better, and then we've focused the police station as the primary, but we have the ability to do perhaps most of the library as well, or maybe all of the library. And
It's an interesting point. Well, we have a motion on the floor.
You want it repeated, or do we know?
No,
what
I
it
think
is?
we understand
Okay.
what it is. You want to do $75 million, portion for the police station, portion for the library, is essentially locked in one vote. And that, now understand what he's asking, I think, is just this comes back to us as a resolution.
Yes.
And you would also join us in a resolution that allows us to split it for the
Sure.
next meeting.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
we bring them both back.
That's right. And that's exactly.
And see
I
who's
think-
got 5 votes next time, because we
Yeah.
got to decide this by
Yeah,
next
I
meeting.
agree. You know, and I think in the last one, I was trying to cut the cost down, and when I wasn't successful, I voted with the majority because we need the police station, and I think that'll happen then. I think there's probably a third potential, and that is the lower cost of the police station under the McCoy sort of Anderson theory of we give you the money and you figure out how it's built.
What would that be cost-wise?
Well, I'm actually, I said 60 million in the proposal, but I'm also looking at attachment 1, number 2, which says 30 years out, 500 per square officer equals $61.8 million. And I think that's if we're going to end up with the 2 standalones, that's where I may want to end up. But we're not there yet.
Yeah, Councilor.
Can I just float an idea here so we can kind of maybe break our loggerhead? Can we vote on whether or not we would support both combined or not and get a price out of this mix? Because ideologically, that sounds like where we're falling. So
Let's find out about the combined is probably the bigger question.
right, because I don't want to go down this if it's going to be a 4-4 and fail, and we can just kind of get on with the.
Well, then, why don't we do a sense of the sense of the council following Councilor Kaiser's replacement motion that, Matt, did you second that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll say seconds that. Why don't we do a vote on the combined? Is that okay? We're just working our way through this.
Are we an amended motion?
Yeah, I don't care if we amend my motion to say, I mean, I could withdraw that motion. Can I withdraw the motion? It's been seconded with the, yeah.
With the consent of the second.
Well, I withdraw the motion and move that we take a
Kaiser's
vote.
got one on if she's got one on the floor. I
No,
think
okay, my motion, though.
She's got a replacement
You can't
motion
have,
on
okay, if that's a replacement motion, then I'm fine with that. I'm waiting for
Could
what
Councilor
Dan said.
Kaiser please restate her substitute motion?
I move that we take a vote I move we take a vote to include a combined option of police facility and library seismic retrofitting
On the May 17 ballot.
on the May 17th ballot.
Second.
Councilor Ossick already seconded.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, though.
Yeah.
That's okay.
They're getting faster.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, you got it?
No, I need a clarification again, sorry.
It's basically just to remove the cost out of the question.
Right.
It's just focusing on the question
The
of.
question is, do we go ahead separately or
That's right,
together?
and just
Yeah,
to remove
this
the
is
cost
combined.
element out of it.
The motion is
Yes.
combined, right?
Right.
Okay. Everybody got it? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay?
Okay, 4-4.
You know, I'm gonna,
Can we get a show of hands for the recorder? Ayes.
All the ayes, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Okay. Councilor Lewis.
Okay, here's my concern about combining them. Two concerns mainly. Oh, I know.
We're gonna keep
I know, but we're
talking
still
here till
talking.
we get somewhere.
Which means I guess I should be talking about separate. The one is, and I'll say it each time, the cost. The cost, I really believe that the number one sensitivity of the voters was the cost. And at least my goal, I want a police facility. If that's all I get, I can be satisfied, as long as we have the discussion about the next bond measure, as we have talked about doing. The second thing is, I think everybody's starting to agree that if we do combine them, it's just the library. It's not anything else. And no mention of another ballot measure in November. And so as far as seismic upgrades for city facilities, my guess is that this building would go to the bottom of the list. And we may or may never have an opportunity to look at it again. That's why I think we can get more of what we want if we just take it by steps. And I disagree. I don't think the citizens out there are distrusting at all. When you look at the professional surveys, we're in the 90s when it comes to how people feel about the service they get from the city. I think we should take heed of that and not be concerned about doing the job we have.
I'll make a motion that we consider, in broad terms with no dollars attached, one motion or one resolution to place on the ballot for May, a measure for the police department or police facility, and a separate motion, and also something for the library in November. And I think that could go on one, right? That's what confuses me.
Motion's fine, yes.
Second.
Okay. Second by Nanki. You want to discuss this?
Well, again, it's just philosophical, I guess, and I'm going to go the other way. You know, we talked about this in a meeting with several counselors and the chief, and I thought Chief Moore made a great comment, and you know, I've thought about it a lot. We all are citing who we talked to, and I suspect, people being people, you're talking to the folks that supported you, the people that sort of think like you. You try to reach out to everybody, but we all have our own folks that we've, you know, worked with and gotten to know and trust us and like us, so they contact us and say, hear different things. And I'm hearing it was too big, and I'm hearing it's too big, and I'm in one of the wealthier wards in town. It was too big, it's too much money, I voted no. That's consistently what I hear. So I'm really concerned, and I know Councilor Lewis said this too, 82 to 75 is still a big number. It's 75 million versus, pick the number, 62, 64 million once and 15 million or so on the other one. Those are two smaller ones. To me, the folks I talked to, I listened to you, I heard what you said. We need to get where we need to be. I think this does that. And put them together, we got a big number, and I think we're at risk again. And finally, I also think we're 5 months difference in the two. It's not like we're pushing this down the road 5 years. It's 5 months. It's not 5 years. And frankly, I'm glad I asked the question about the wording here, because I thought, okay, we're going to fix this thing so it can't fall down. Well, now we hear we can't guarantee that. So we're going to go out here and say, hey, we're going to do this, but you know, if we're going to be honest, and it may or may not fall down. It's not going to fall down. We hope it's not going to fall down. That was really troubling to me. You know, if we're going to put it at S3 and the police are at S1 and we don't want something to fall down, it seems like we should be going S1 all the way down the road here, not going S3 on some of this stuff. But anyway, with that involved, I think the urgency for me slows down a little. But again, we're talking 5 knots, not 5 years, not 2 years. It's 5 months.
Councilor Anderson.
I will support the motion for 2 reasons. The first is we need a police station. We need it badly. We need to get it back on the ballot as soon as we can, because we've got a level of public education here as to the need. And the second reason is because we are showing our good faith with the people in terms of saying not, we may do this in the future, but at the same point saying this is going to be on the ballot in November on the library.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Nanki.
Thanks. And same deal. It's like, I support seismic retrofits across the board. You know, our building and safety people are actually going out telling people how to reinforce their own homes and making sure they're secured to their foundation as well. People are starting to actually come to the realization that it will happen eventually, and we keep moving, and we keep moving, and we keep moving. I'll 100% commit to taking a resolution for library only and shoving it out in November.
Yeah, I'll join you in
We
that
say we
as
can't,
well.
hold that reality, but I will
Yeah.
put
Well,
my
I think
hand up in the air on it. And
Councilor
at 5
Cook
months,
made great.
if we can get the police facility passed, that, if we don't, the library is like way down the line, because there's 3 other things for timing that will just eat that up. So I want them both to happen.
Yeah.
But it does raise a good point. If you're going to the cost range that's lower, that'll be a lower difference, because you both were saying that your constituents were saying it was too expensive. What do you do if it comes back and it doesn't pass?
Oh,
Then at that point, I can say they don't want it.
yeah.
Yeah, then we have to
We
move
got a
on.
problem. Yeah.
We have to move on to fire trucks and seismic.
That is correct.
I need-
Councilor Lewis?
I need to get clarification of the motion.
Yeah, I was thrilled.
Oh, geez, I thought it was 9 o'clock, not yet.
The old guy's getting tired.
The November ballot measure, is the motion to do just the library, or is it to do?
Just the library.
For November.
Councilor Lewis, the reason that is one of the things, and we've got the shops to consider. We don't have a number right yet. We're going to pass something, but I think it must be on one of the many committees I'm on, the Finance Committee. We talked and we were staggering those out, and I had a question in there, why is the city, the library, that was when the proposal was, we put the library with the police facility and it's 79 million and move forward was one of the ideas. And then you looked on our listing of where we wanted these other ballot measure to go to fund things, and the city hall retrofit was 4 or 5 years down the road. Well, one of the reasons it was that, you can't really do anything in city hall until you move the police out, and it's going to take 2 to 3 years to get the police building built, and so there's no sense in tying that to the library if we want the library immediately, because it's going to sit there anyway. So the thought there was to put it back a few years and plug some other things in beneath. That's really the reason why.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councilor Kaser.
Because maybe I can suggest something that might help you here.
Doubt it.
Can we consider or amend the motion to just consider passing a resolution for putting seismic retrofitting on November, but leave that discussion
Open. No.
for later about which buildings?
No, it needs to be specific.
Councilor Anderson.
I would strongly oppose that, and that's because of the two differences that Councilor McCoy and Director Fernandez have said on those 2 other issues. The shops, we may have some alternative funds. We don't have a plan. This particular thing, I guess that was probably a good choice of words. The city building we're in now, we can't do anything about this for 2 to 3 years. We can do something about the library right away.
Yeah, I think that's really compelling, is that we can literally go on the ballot in November. We're ready to go, and we will be better ready, I think, by November. Yes, Councilor.
And then, as I spoke to Mr. Dannon the other day, as we move down through that system, once we figure out what real contingency has to be and what those numbers are for the November, I don't know, we'll be ready by then, but if nothing else, for when we get ready for shops and everything else, we'll have some extra funds that'll be there, which can help us reduce our other contingency and escalation numbers possibly for November, or again, for a couple of years out, we'll have extra funds if they're unspent from the police facility. So it does us a good thing as having some carryover money, or it's like, okay, I got 2 projects and I got, 15 versus 18%, or it gives us some movement on protecting ourselves and being able to still put something out that is reasonable for the voters.
Very good. Is everyone ready to vote? Okay, everyone in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Sorry.
Okay, passes unanimously. Now, what we have, let's just take just a moment, because I know we're all getting tired. We now have an agreement that we will split these between May and November. Library in November, we'll have a resolution covering, I assume, a resolution that absolutely locks us as tight as we can get into that. And then we're going to go for a police station. Which police station is the next question?
I like the one down the O'Brien.
Yeah, that one? So are we talking the 115,000 square foot,
Let's talk about dollars.
$63 million?
We get 64.
64?
63.9.
64, 63.9.
I would like to talk about 61.8 under the theory that the McCoy-Anderson theory, we tell them how much to build and they build it, and supported by attachment 1, the answer to question number 2, and thirdly, that's even a bigger cost differential.
20 million.
Yeah, yeah, and so we're talking about that's a $2 million difference. And I have every confidence in our staff and our police officers that they can come up with, make that happen in a way that will allow them to continue to provide the excellent service that they have provided through their long history with the city.
Councilor Anderson moves.
Yes. $61.8 million for the police station.
Police station.
Second.
Second from Councilor Rossi. Okay. Councilor McCoy.
My problem with that, where that number comes from, is that it's using one officer a year to get to that number. And we've heard all this testimony. It depends on how you look at it. But since this 28,000 square foot deal was built, we've averaged 1.8. So to put one in, now we're down to jiggling numbers to get to arrive at a solution, and I'm not sure it's the right number to use, and that makes me uncomfortable. I'm assuming, and here we've got a 190 and 30-year growth of 1.8, then we end up at 122,000 square feet and a 67 million. So my question would be to staff, where's the 63.99 or 64 million number? That's 115,000 square feet, is that right? Right? So it's somewhere between 1 and 1.8, if we're using that number. But, so that's my issue there. I don't think one's realistic. It's going to be too small. I'd rather go to the 115 and whatever that costs, that's what we should do.
Councilor Anderson and Councilor Nate.
Thank you. You know, I preface this with what I've said all along. You know, we have a terrific police department. We need to support them, and they need a new building. But I think looking at this as saying, well, 61.8 is figures 1.0 officer per year. We're now getting down into the weeds. I just picked that as a figure, and I think there are other ways to arrive at that figure. We're talking about a $2 million difference. And, you know, that's a decrease in the contingency factor. That's, you know, do we need the community room to be as big as it is planned? There are all sorts of things that could cut that figure down, and I have confidence that we can come back, you know, with this lower figure, and then also it's incrementally easier to pass, I think, and that's the goal of all of us, is we want our fine police department to be in a building that they deserve. Now, you know, maybe they deserve maybe they deserve an $82 million building, but we've already been told the answer to that is no.
Councilor Lewis? Whoops, sorry. I just got here. I missed
That's
you.
right. That's what he said, Councilor Anderson, followed by Dan, because he ran out the room.
I'm going to support the motion as long as I think I understand it correctly. And we are really getting down into the roots of the weeds now, but there is something psychological about telling people we cut $20 million, almost 25% off it. We heard you, but at the same time, and I mean, I think it still is true. We are doing something for our police department that needs to be done and that will be appropriate for decades. The officer count is really just arithmetic. If it is 1.0, then it will last longer. you get to capacity further down the road. If it's 1.8, it will get to capacity shorter. But in either case, I think we're doing the best that the community will accept right now, and so I'll vote for the motion.
Councilor Nanki?
Thank you. And as I looked at numbers and square foot and everything, it was like, you know, we're talking about upgrades to seismic for the library and or the civic center building itself, and we're going to retrofit it and it'll live for another 30 years. Well, if a police facility can do similar, especially if it's built to that level of a seismic rating, I would assume we would be able to do tweaks to it 30, 40, 50 years from now and extend its life out significantly. It will have no growth. And we'll have to do something else at that time as well. So from a dollar perspective, it'd be nice to put anything we could towards expanding some of the square footage with contingencies, but I was looking at same deal as well. It's got to pass the voters, so 61.8 is a little, it's like that 59.999.
I like that one better.
But it gets, you know, from 82 to less than 62. And so I would support that. Albeit, ideally, I would prefer to make a facility that would last for 70, 80 years.
Yeah. Councilor Cook?
Just to remind the council that the needs of a building and the needs of the community are not interchangeable. So while we are talking about how long the facilities can last, because that's what this bond is for, ultimately, we are in service to the people that live here, and the needs of the community can change, and they can change in 10 years, 5 years. So just being mindful of that, and again, what does this project, what is the message that we're sending, and then what needs does this project meet? Whose needs are being met, and how is that reflecting in our community?
Just a quick follow-up on that one at the end, especially since we've been talking about Uber lately, and, you know, cars that could potentially chase bad guys by themselves without a police officer in it, or, you know, AI. It just in my lifetime, when my grandmother had been, you know, 100 years.
Here we go.
Oh, there will be a lot of changes.
Yeah.
But no matter what, we'll still have people that need to be inside of a building. We may just not have as many that need to be out.
It is. Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, real quick, only because it's been so consistent for so long. I'll go out on a limb and say I'll guarantee you 25, 35, 45 years from now, safety in the city will be the #1 issue. It always has been.
Okay, well, West.
Very good. I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of Councilor Anderson's motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. So that's what we'd like to have come to us. Do we need, for any reason, to talk about the amount on the library, or could we leave that open to get bigger in case we need it? That's all I'd ask.
I think we can leave it open, Mr. Mayor, but I also think that the library costs are more fixed than the cost for the police station.
They feel like
that's could be flexible, and the library cost, we're going to have to do this, it costs this per square foot and that sort of stuff. I think that's
The other thing I hope is that there's a real understanding that no matter what happens with the police facility, the library is going out in November. Yes. That is done. No argument.
Competition on.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So my plan, assuming you go to the next session here and direct me to do so, is on the 27th, you'll have one resolution for a May police facility of 61.8, and then you'll have another resolution for a November 17 library at 15.3. Yes. So I will have that dollar amount in there.
Okay, we're going to not do this tonight. We could. We do have a council meeting we can call unless you feel strongly you'd like to vote on this. We'll hold off until next week. This will be a quick, soon order of business. Let's make it fairly quick, too. Let's just plan on moving this thing along and we're done. Okay? Great, well then we will meet again on Monday. We're adjourned.